In the last video, we took a weighted average by multiplying each value by its weight, adding up all of those products, and then dividing by the total weight. That involved keeping track of a lot of stuff on the calculator, making sure we had all of our parentheses in the right place, making sure we copied each number correctly each time. And so in this video, I'm going to show you a way to use the power of the calculator to help to keep track of all of those numbers. Whenever we have lists of values, there's probably something that we can do that makes use of the list functions of the calculator. So there are two buttons that are going to be relevant to our interests here. Or two commands, rather. They're on the same button. One is the stat button. Whenever we think lists of values, we should think statistics. And then above the stat button in blue, we have the list command. Both the stat button and the list command accessed through the stat button are going to be our friends here. So the first thing we'd like to do is enter our lists of values. So we have one list of values and one list of weights. We'd like to enter these lists on the calculator. To enter lists on the calculator, we press the Stat button and just select the first option. Now, if you've used the lists on your calculator before, you might have values in some of your lists. Like here, I might have 8 and 9 in list 1. If you do, to clear a list, use the up arrow to go to the very top, select the list number, hit clear, and then enter. That clears the list. So for this problem, I'm going to enter my values in list 1, it says L1 at the top, and my weights in list 2. So my values are 80, 61, 17, 80, 61, 29, and 55. You notice the mistake I just made. I started reading across rows instead of down the columns. Don't do that. You want all the values in one list, all the weights in another list. So my weights are 12, 17, 31, and 15. And the only mistake that you can make here, other than just copying a number wrong, is getting the numbers out of alignment. You want to make sure that each value lines up with its weight. Okay, so now I'm going to get back to my main calculator screen. To do that, I'm going to press second and then the mode key. You'll see that it says quit above that. If I were saying that out loud, I'm just going to say second, quit. Right. Okay, now I'm back at the main calculator screen. I have all that stuff entered in the lists. How could I access it? Well, looking at the calculator keypad, I see that I have L1, L2, L3, L4, L5, and L6, just above the numbers 1 through 6 in blue. Well, whenever I want to get the blue command, I press second and then that key. So if I want to access L1, I press second 1. If I press second 2, I get L2, and so on. In this problem, I'm only using L1 and L2. If you had data in your L1 and L2 that you wanted to keep, you could use any other lists. Just whenever I talk about L1 and L2, use whichever lists you used. Okay, so notice when I enter those, I get just the list of numbers in these curly brackets, right? Okay, so let's think about what I can do with that. Well, I know that I want to multiply every value in L1 by the corresponding value in L2. Well, what happens if I say L1 times L2? Oh, I get a list of numbers. I've got 4 numbers, and each one is the value in L1 times the corresponding value in L2. Okay, well, that helps, but I certainly don't want to copy all of those out. Maybe there's a way to get the calculator to add up all of the numbers in a list. And of course there is. I wouldn't be telling you this if there wasn't. Let's look at the list functions. Right, so we used the stat button to access the lists in the first place. Now if we press second stat to access the list functions. So let's see, what do we see here? Names, L1, L2, L3, L. Oh, okay. So this is an alternate way to get access to my lists, but I like the keys better. Right arrow over, ops. These are list operations. So for example, we could sort one of our lists. We could say, how big is one of our lists? We could fill a list with the same number. Some of these maybe we have no idea what they do, but later on we might be thinking of something and we might come back here. I don't see anything that looks like it probably adds things up unless this CUM is probably cumulative. Cumulative sum, maybe. But let's look at this math column. Oh, okay, I like this. Right, min, that gives me the minimum value. Max, that gives me the maximum. Mean and median, we're going to talk about later. But right now our friend is this sum command. So the sum command, if I say sum L1, that adds up all the numbers in L1. If I say sum L2, that adds up all the numbers in L2. What we'd like to do is to take the sum of that product. So if I say sum L1 times L2, right? That means, so I've got these parentheses here that says take the product first. So multiply each value in L1 by the corresponding value in L2, and then add them all up. Oh, hey, if you remember the last video, that's the same number we got for the sum of all those products. And then that sum of L2 is the same number we got for all the lists. So, okay, I think I can write down a process for taking a weighted average using these sums. So assuming we have our values in L1 and our weights in L2, then the weighted average is the sum of L1 times L2, so the sum of the value times its weight, divided by the sum of the weights. So let's actually run through that. Sum of L1 times L2 divided by the sum of L2, and that's the same number that we got in the last video. And that's great. That means that this process we came up with on the calculator actually works. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but this is really tedious. I'd rather just do it by hand, right? And that's totally legitimate for this list of numbers. But let's do another example. Suppose we have this list. Right? This is a big list of numbers. The numbers are big and awkward. I feel like I'm very likely to make a copying mistake with a list this long. Right? I would rather have a calculator keep track of all the numbers and just enter the lists in a format where I can just look at them. So, for this example, my values are 89.21, 99.37, 104.83, 67.21, 99.43, 33.77, and 9.41. Notice, by the way, I wasn't making any effort to say the names of those numbers correctly. I just want to get them entered into the calculator right. I don't care what they're called. Okay. And then in my L2, my values are 8, 6, 12, 9, 11, 2, and 3. And now I'm just going to put my cursor over into L3 so that I can proofread this. Because it's very easy to make a mistake doing entry like this. Okay. So to find the weighted average, I take the sum of the products and divide it by the sum of the weights. And I get that the weighted average is about 8553.4. And that seems reasonable. The big thing to make sure of when you've taken a weighted average, it should be between the smallest value and the largest value, because obviously it's got to be somewhere in the middle, so it's got to be somewhere in between. My smallest value is 941. My largest value is 10,000 something. Most of my values are in the 8, 9, 10,000 range, so this seems more or less reasonable. Right. So using the calculator to keep track of this is incredibly handy, and it just saves a lot of opportunities for making copying mistakes.